Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we are going to take a slight detour around my usual tech content today, and hopefully that doesn't upset the YouTube algorithm that I work for. But I think, given my channel demographics, today's topic will be of interest, and that is the game Crossbows and Catapults. They just remade this the other day, and I happened to stumble upon it right when it came out, so I bought it to see how it compares to the original, and I played a couple of games with my daughter the other night. And what's been fun about being a dad in his 40s, having grown up in the 80s, is that my kids are starting to get into some of the things that I was into at their age. And it's been bringing up all these memories of these toys that I used to play with, including Crossbows and Catapults here. So what I thought we would do is take a look at this modern reboot of a classic game and see how it stacks up, literally, with the original. Let's get to it. Now, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for the game with my own funds. All of the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. Now, I did own the game in the 80s, and my parents bought that for me, in full disclosure. But I couldn't find it at my mom's place. She must have thrown it out after all these years. But I do have a picture of it from the 1984 Sears Wish Book. And of course, there are other channels on YouTube that have done a lot with the original version, so I would point you in the direction of some of those videos as well. I didn't want to take another creator's work without their permission. But this photo will give us a better idea as to what the game looked like. And what you had here are castle walls that you would construct along with a castle, and you had these plastic figures that you would set up behind the castle walls, and the objective was to shoot these plastic pucks at your opponent's castle and figures using either the crossbow device here or the catapult device to take them out. And as you can see from the original TV commercial here, it was pretty fun. You would knock the castle walls down. They came down pretty easy with a good hit. And there was some degree of strategy involved in trying to get your opponents wiped out before you were. And it was always just a lot of fun because it was a very physical game with plastic pucks getting shot all over the room and everything. And there were some things you could do to the crossbows and catapults by adding rubber bands to them that made them infinitely more powerful. And that's going to be something I think that impacted the design of the more modern version. But that gives you a good feel as to what this game was about. If you are a fellow kid of the 80s, you no doubt have probably played with this game at some point, and I'm probably triggering a bunch of memories right now. So let's open up the current version of the game and get a feel for what has changed. And unfortunately, like a lot of these board games that are getting reimagined for the current times, they have stripped out a lot. So you do get your instruction book here that tells you how to play the game, and you get a feel for all the different components that you have to build your castle with. Unfortunately, you don't get a large castle piece like you did before. So in the old version, there was an actual castle with a tower on the top. Now you get this that you have to stack up on one of the castle walls, which I'll show you in a minute. The bricks also are a bit different. They are not the same as the originals here. You can see the interlocking blocks here. They're kind of like Legos, are not as large. And I did find in playing this game with my daughter that it's harder to knock the castles down, actually, with this new version, which does add a little bit more to the gameplay. But you can see what the blocks used to look like and what they look like now. The big change is that they got rid of the rubber bands on all of these things. So they have a spring-loaded catapult here, which actually does a pretty good job. I feel like the amount of force it provides is similar to the single rubber band version of the original. The catapult here does have one feature that the 80s version didn't have, which is that you can adjust the angle of where it shoots here just by twisting this little thing here to adjust the angle. So that was kind of a neat addition to it. But the crossbows, in my opinion, are significantly degraded. I'll show you what these look like now. So instead of actually pulling back the crossbow thing, what you have to do now is squeeze it. And it doesn't have all that much energy that it builds up in here. And you really have to get it positioned right to get it shot forward. But if you're at the distance you would have been in the 80s with this game, it doesn't really have enough power to get there. So what I found is that you have to kind of push forward with it as you're squeezing it to give it a little more energy going out. But it's not as good as the original crossbows were, unfortunately. Now, my friends and I used to upgrade these crossbows with 3 or 4 rubber bands, as many as we could fit, which provided a lot more energy on these things. But they're not going to let you do that on this current iteration. You'll also notice here, as we're looking at the original game, how many pucks the original came with. This version only comes with 6 total. There's no blue pucks at all. And so you have to basically divvy up the pucks here and toss them back and forth as you play. I think the original game actually had faces on all of the pucks because they were part of your soldiers and they could be captured if they didn't make it all the way across. So that whole strategy of the game is gone because you only get 6 pucks in here and not the larger number, I think 12 in total, that you got on the original. So here is what a completed castle looks like with all of the blocks in use for the gray team here. And if you look back at the 80s, the kit came with more creative options because you had more wall blocks to work with and you had the singular castle piece. Here they kind of integrated the castle into the wall, so you can't come up with as many creative defenses as my friends and I used to back in the 80s trying to prevent these high-powered pucks from breaching our defenses here. They also recommend a smaller game area. So if you look here, it's about 2.5 feet from one castle to the other. And back in the 80s, they were recommending about a 6-foot distance overall, so about 3.5 to 4 feet between the castles, largely because these devices were a lot more powerful than they are now. And it does take longer to destroy the castle here, as you can see, partly because these pieces don't fire as fast as they used to, even with one rubber band in the 80s. The figures are really nicely detailed. They're a little better than the 80s version that I remember, so those are kind of cool. But overall, I would have liked to have seen a little more in the way of creative options for castle design, which I think would make the game more interesting and at least on par with what we got back in the 80s. So unfortunately, this reboot is not as fun as the original. It has less pieces. I do think the Catapult is a nice improvement and it offers a similar amount of weapon velocity, but my friends and I spent most of our game playing with the Crossbow, and this is a real step back. This tweezer-like function here is not even how a crossbow works, and it's just hard to get enough velocity going to do any kind of sizable damage to the castle. And that makes the games go a lot longer. On the 80s version, you could get a really good hit in, and that would really move the game quickly. This one requires a lot of back and forth to make progress. So overall, it's a bit of a miss, unfortunately. I was hoping that they would be more like the original and not less like it, but that is what it is. So we'll have to see if they come up with any add-on packs, additional blocks or whatever that might enhance the gameplay. But as it is right here, this is something that I was a bit disappointed in. This costs $34.99 at the time I'm recording this video, so it's not all that expensive. And if you don't have the original kicking around and you do want to play a couple of rounds of Crossbows and Catapults, you can pick this up and have at it. That is going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.